Thank you for tuning in to the Into the Classroom series produced by Mental Health California, sponsored by Blue Shield of California's Blue Sky Initiative.
Greetings. My name is Conrad Crump, also known as Coach Crump, and I'd like to welcome you to our Into the Classroom session. Into the Classroom is a student mental health awareness multimedia series produced by Mental Health California. Today's topic, the adverse effects of alcohol and marijuana. So what's the downside of using alcohol and marijuana? Today's conversation will reveal some surprising facts, and we'll also learn how even casual drug and alcohol use can directly affect young people in a negative way. I've got some pretty amazing folks with me for today's conversation. First, I will begin with introducing our clinician, a friend of mine. This brother is amazing, Christian Jacobs. He's a licensed marriage and family therapist and a leading Brother Be Well clinical advisor. Christian is a noted therapist who has expertise in substance use prevention and more, and his depth of knowledge in youth really helps their families as well as young folks throughout California. Welcome, Christian.
Conrad, how goes it? How you doing?
It goes well. It goes well. I'll go ahead and introduce our youth guests who will really kind of be driving our conversation for our topic. First up, we got Michael Betlock, who is a student at Sacramento State University. Welcome, Michael.
What's up, Coach?
We also have Joel Suazo, who is a student at Los Angeles City College. Good to see you, Joel. And we have Keyshawn Williams, who is also a student at Sacramento State University.
Good to be here, guys. How you doing?
Good. And last but definitely not least, we have Jaden Turner, also representing Sacramento State University as well.
Good to be here with y'all tonight.
All right, so let's get into it. Adverse effects of alcohol and marijuana. Christian, before we get going too far in, I'd actually like to see if you can maybe provide a little bit of overview on some of the adverse effects of alcohol and marijuana, specifically on young folks.
Comrade, there's a few, and I could just kind of go over like a basic overview of some of the effects. A lot of it is physical, mental, emotional. That's just those are just a few areas of how it affects the body and the mind, and also the mental component. And then also in terms of addiction versus dependence, we can get more into that later. Being addicted to something versus being dependent, and what the difference between those two are. So those are just a few things that I think we can just kind of give an overview, and then later on we can kind of get more into it. But yeah, those are the basic elements of how it impacts a person.
Good stuff, man. And kind of going into it, looking at some of the surveys and studies, it's shown that 17.5 million young adults ages 18 to 25 have actually reported drinking alcohol in the past month. Folks who are not even old enough to be drinking, which is over half of the individuals in this age group. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Unhealthy effects of alcohol. We understand that there's a lot of unhealthy effects, that can impact young folks and how they are developing, especially in their young developmental stages. So that's something that we want to also be aware of as well. I want to highlight some of the statistics here. It says that there has been alcohol consumption increases among certain age groups, 1% between the 12 and 13-year-olds, nearly 17% between ages 16 and 17, and almost 32% between 18 and 20-year-olds. So let's get a little bit further into the conversation and talk about alcohol and impaired brain development. As I said, the teenage brain is still developing. So this is something that we want to be aware of when we're having these conversations. And I know Christian was kind of going to allude to it. Before we get too far, I want to just by a raise of hands, no shame. Has any of the folks on this call engaged in alcohol or marijuana before in the past? Just by raising a hand. Okay, so it's not something that anyone is foreign to. We want to kind of talk about some of those things and get to some of the reasons why and understand how that can impair young folks. Let's go ahead and go to our next slide. We also looking at the impaired brain development, and then the next slide talking about alcohol-related accidents. So understanding that folks who drink, really are impaired. Folks who may engage or consume marijuana are impaired when it comes to driving a motor vehicle or operating equipment, things of that nature. So those are things we want to also be aware of, particularly as it relates to our young folks and the health, safety, and development of them. Another statistic really quickly, in 2019, 25% of drivers who are age 15 to 20 were involved in fatal crashes. And those folks were folks who had alcohol in their system. So definitely something to raise awareness on. But I will go ahead and turn it over to our young folks. So Michael, Joel, Keyshawn, Jaden, I'd like to ask, some of you guys just throughout some of our conversation tonight about your thoughts. And I'll start off with you, Michael. Can you talk about maybe some of the statistics that you've heard so far and how that impacts young folks today when it comes to alcohol and marijuana use?
Yeah, what kind of took me by shock right now was when you put up that statistic that showed, I think it was around 30% increase, ages like 18 to 25 or something, with alcohol. And that's just crazy to think of because, like you said, three those ages 18, 19, 20 can't even drink yet. So for there
Right.
to be a 30% increase, that's just, real eye-opening to think about that. You know, kids our age are engaging in that type of behavior at such a frequent level. It's really something that we need to hone in on and figure out why, so that we can get it situated.
Definitely. And how about you, Keyshawn? Understanding, understanding that young folks are still developing. Can you talk about those developmental stages and what that might mean for a younger person?
Yeah, I feel like it's tough because when you're in that age, you don't know that you're still developing. You might still think that you're starting to gain your own sense of self and your own independence, and you're starting to think that you have it all figured out. And, later on in life, if you have used marijuana or alcohol during that time frame, the thing is, you might look back at your life. I know that I do. I look back at my life and think, like, dang, what could I have been smarter? Could I be more equipped as an adult? Could I be quicker as an adult? Have I not partake in alcohol or marijuana use? And so for me, the thing is, I don't want anyone younger to look back and think that, dang, what if I messed up a certain part of my brain? Or what if I didn't develop as well as I was supposed to, or as well as I could have, because I partook in alcohol or marijuana use heavily when I was younger.
Yeah, no, very good. And you talk about that understanding of when you were younger and engaging in that. I often think back on my own lived experience, as well as some of my friends, folks who I know who were using alcohol at a very young age, much younger than me, or using marijuana, smoking weed in high school, and how it really impaired a lot of their cognitive decision making, really made some poor decisions. Some of them decisions that cause their entire lives to change and go down different paths just based off of one situation. So we can get into a little bit more of that, but I want to go ahead and continue through these slides because we don't have a lot of time, and we have a lot of folks here with some great things that they'd like to contribute to the conversation. So I want to go ahead and talk about alcohol use disorder and physical health. When it comes to alcohol consumption, you've got liver damage, weakened immune system, all of these different types of cardiovascular problems, things of that nature. Do folks, just by a show of hands, do folks know folks who have liver problems or have problems, physical health problems as a result of their smoking or ingesting marijuana or as a result of them consuming alcohol? And I know I certainly do. And Christian, I'd like to ask you if you could maybe talk to us a little bit about what that might mean for young folks.
The thing about it is that, we have a lot of things that we consider. And just by a show of hands for the folks, college students deal with several different things, right? And we're trying to figure out why are students drinking or why younger people drink. Just real quick, what is one word of what you think that issue is? The main reason why people may overdrink or smoke too much. Just really quick, one word. Jaden?
I'd probably just say overall stress.
Okay, good. Stress. How about one more?
Social anxiety.
Social anxiety. The number one reason, and the study just came out, is loneliness. The number one reported thing for college students between the ages of 18 and 23 is loneliness. So that's one of the main reasons, which is the same thing that's connected to older people, 7 years old. So that loneliness factor is very important to identifying where the root cause is. So Conrad, you asked how does that relate? You're looking at that. That's one of the main contributing factors, that loneliness component. And when we identify how we can create a better overall well-being for a person, young or old, then that's when we can start chipping into addiction and marijuana and things of that sort.
Absolutely. No, very good. I appreciate that. And, that is something in my mind, what I was thinking was the one word is a hyphenated word of peer pressure. A lot of times folks may be okay with having a beverage or something like that when they're in college. But I know that a lot of times some folks don't know when to cut it off, and they continue drinking and they talk about binge drinking, right? Like having those, back to back drinks where you're just having 5 drinks within a real short time period. That can really have an impact on your physical health. So that can be really harmful. And it's really prevalent amongst young college students. And I'm looking at a bunch of college students right now. Sac State is represented well here in Los Angeles. So I just think about those things and how that can have an impact on young folks. And I know we talked about alcohol, but let's go ahead and shift a little bit to marijuana. So in the next slide, it talks about a national survey that was done on marijuana and how it is one of the most used drugs in the United States, with 35.4% of young folks between 18 and 25 having used marijuana in the last year. Would you guys say that marijuana is a popular substance that folks use? And if so, maybe why? And I'll ask you, Jaden, if you'd like to elaborate.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely, especially in California, it's probably one of the most prevalent, narcotics, that people would consume in, because, you hear it in social media, you hear it in, rap songs, all this kind of stuff. It's everywhere. And almost, people would say it would be like, oh, that's the culture of California, is cannabis and weed in general.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, totally. And moving on with that, when we talk about cannabis or marijuana, the aspect of how it impacts mental health. I think one of the folks on the call talked about how social anxiety, I think it was you, Joel, you talked about social anxiety and how that might be a reason why people may consume marijuana. But realizing that with that, we can go on to the next slide as well. With that, marijuana has actually been shown to have an increased risk of anxiety. So it's almost like a loop, where folks are using the marijuana for the anxiety, which in turn is increasing the anxiety. Has any one of you maybe had that experience where you may know someone that uses marijuana because of their anxiety? Maybe Joel, if you want to maybe elaborate on some of the things that you had said earlier.
Yeah, glad I could jump in. For the most part, social anxiety, when people feel uncomfortable going around large groups or other peers, or, overall just people that they don't really know, they can feel very uncomfortable. So they either indulge in smoking cannabis, marijuana, or, like we said earlier, they'll start to drink, they'll drink socially, and then definitely become dependent on it. For me, I've never really came dependent on it. I have tried marijuana before. I have drank before, but some of my family members, I actually feel that they can be dependent on it, or it'll be like a relaxer or a wind downer. Somebody that goes to work all day that does physically labor, they might just want to come back and smoke some marijuana and then relax and go to sleep. But then they become dependent on that, and when they can't relax naturally or produce those natural endorphins, or those chemicals that your body naturally produces, then things can go downhill, or they can start gaining disorders or having mental health problems.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree with you on that. And just thinking about my own self, in community college, when I was in community college, I know that, I was using marijuana really heavily, as well as drinking a lot. And it really caused my motivation to go down. And I realized it was also impacting my academic success. And it caused me to not be able to turn in stuff, or it caused me to forget things. And it really just put a damper on, where I could have been. And talking about, what I believe it was Keyshawn talked about, when I was younger, could I have developed more? I think about that in an academic sense, because had I not been engaged in those substances, I probably could have gone on to school further sooner than what I already have done. But again, it's not about me. I want to talk with you guys and talk more about some of your experiences as well. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Talking about THC and impaired cognitive function. Michael, can you talk to us about the ways in which marijuana may affect brain development and how it can impair thoughts and decisions?
Yeah, I feel like with marijuana or THC in particular, when you're high, you kind of have, at least for me, like a heightened sense of like paranoia to a sense. You start, your thoughts can just start, rambling, and it's just a completely different way of thinking than when you're sober. And so I feel like that can completely just alter, a person's actions, or specific thought patterns, like I said. And it's all because of that one substance. And I know from, like I said, my own experience, that my thoughts are definitely different when I'm high, or if you're off THC. And I've noticed that that's a real, it just doesn't, it's not something that is comfortable, and that's a big reason why I've completely just, try to stay away from that, because I feel like you're not thinking straight when you're usually on that. And, it's just, like I said, for me, it wasn't comfortable at all.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. Michael, given that lived experience and that honesty and vulnerability and sharing. So I appreciate that. Let's go ahead and go on to our next slide. Understanding that, as we just talked about, it impairs some of the thinking and so on and so forth. There's also, physical problems like, respiratory problems, the impact it can have on the lungs. I, have known some folks that have tried marijuana and they say it really burns their chest, or it's painful for them to smoke marijuana. Again, not just from the inhale of it, but also the cough that comes from it. I know that other people who may not smoke also have been in environments where people have smoked and the smoke bothers them and all these types of things. Jaden, can you maybe share a little bit of an experience or someone that you may know that has had irritation or been in an environment where marijuana was being smoked where it was not desirable or harmful to them?
Yeah, so have a very specific memory of my freshman year of college, and there's this girl in my class, and like I knew her personally. She was like r- pretty like allergic to like marijuana, and
Mm.
so she was in class, and like somebody was smoking in class actually, and she started just like hacking up a lung. She was coughing for like 10 minutes. She had to like walk out of class and
Wow.
go to the go to like the nurse's office or whatever at the time. And it was just like, she was having like a asthma attack pretty much just from being around it. So I've seen it in small instances like that, but yeah, it's just crazy to see that like, some people just don't have any regard, especially in a class setting like that as well.
Yeah, and I was one of those people in community college where I didn't have any regard, and I think a lot of that is because some of my decision-making skills were a little bit, inhibited or blurred at the time, where it was kind of like I didn't really care as much, probably due to the fact that I was under the influence of marijuana. We've got our licensed clinician right here, Christian Jacobs. Christian, can you maybe talk to us about some of those other physical, cognitive impacts that marijuana can have on young folks?
Yeah, another good. It's good y'all brought that up because a lot of the research is now showing that it's called substance-induced psychosis. Now, few folks were talking about it. Is basically you're allowing a substance like marijuana or alcohol or heroin, for that matter, some methamphetamine, is inducing psychosis, so hallucinations. So studies are showing that most folks can experience hallucinations. As we know, I always use the example from Friday, and Smokey's in the chicken coop. He's hallucinating. He's hearing pigeons. Even though that was probably something other than weed, but it was a combination of. So I just wanted to share that, and also something else that y'all are talking about is say, when I was high, when I was smoking, I couldn't do well in school. I'm going to give y'all know, I'm going to give y'all the clinical part and the why, right? And the why behind that is another research was done, taking students to see how weed impacts them over 24 hours. So, and basically the results came back. It takes 28 days for the impact of attention, concentration, and memory to go away. So it affects your attention. It affects the verbal working memory of the brain. Also that verbal learning part. Also time, the sense of time and understanding. Also remembering that due to the new potency of weed, we say that, in the 2000s, I think it was at 2%. Now you look at the back of the weed package, it says 35, 40%. So now due to the potency is, even bringing more of a cause. So to say all that is just really saying, now we have to analyze how that may impact the developing brain, in high school or college, on top of that. So that just gives you a few indicators to let you know that it does affect your verbal, your mental, your attention, memory, things of that sort, and also moodiness. So those are some physical attributes and why it occurs.
Wonderful. Yeah, thanks for that, Christian. I mean, yeah, I didn't know that, and that's the clinical side of it. And you're absolutely right about that potency. I've noticed that I, don't smoke or don't drink anymore, but when I did, I began to notice that the potency was going up and was increasing. So something to definitely take note of. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Marijuana and impaired driving. We know that, of course, this substance can impair your driving or your ability to drive. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has reported that marijuana is associated with increased risk of teen car crashes. The psychoactive effects of marijuana can impair their judgment, coordination, and reaction time, making it dangerous to operate a vehicle. And moving on to the next slide, education and awareness. Again, that's why we're here, right? To talk about this, to educate folks who may be watching this video, raise awareness amongst folks like yourselves that are on this call, as well as your peers. And, the folks who may be a little younger than you, who might be watching this that can say, hey, I didn't know that, or I learned something new today. So it's all about education and awareness. We want to make sure that folks are aware of the potential outcomes that can happen if they are engaging in consuming these substances. Let's go ahead and move on to our next slide. Peer support and positive role models. Let's go ahead and talk about this a little bit, because I've got some gentlemen on the call, and I'd like to know if you yourselves have offered peer support, and if so, maybe kind of talk to us about that. And let me ask Joel. I'll ask you to kick it off.
Awesome. Yeah. So for peer support, I think it's always good, for youth to be occupied, are involved in extracurricular activities, maybe sports, maybe a hobby, maybe skateboarding, something along those lines, and just keeping good people around you, because sometimes when you have those bad friends, or you have those people who want to be daredevils, they can kind of peer pressure you into doing something that you might not want to do, or indulging in these type of substances. And when people get bored, also, they can also get into, smoking weed or drinking. So you really don't want to do that, and just have good people around you, so you can stay on track and become successful.
Good stuff. Good stuff. That's the way. I appreciate that, Joel. Thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to our next slide, talking about healthy coping mechanisms. We don't have much time, but maybe in like 30 seconds, Keyshawn, I want to make sure you get in here a little bit. Let's talk about some of these coping mechanisms. Can you talk to us about ways folks can manage stress and other things that they may be dealing with outside of marijuana and alcohol?
Yeah, a couple good ways to cope is you can, get outside, do something fun with your friends. You can play sports. You could get some exercise in. You could even turn to something like creating. If you have artistic outlets, that's something else that can help you. And, it's a funny thing to use alcohol and marijuana as coping, because it might feel like you're better and you're coping while you're doing it, but as soon as the effects of wear off, you're going to be worse than when you started. So actually, it's a bad coping mechanism for you to be able to feel better. So that's why, if the end goal is for you to really feel better and for to manage stress, you want to do something healthy so that you can manage your stress and you can feel better.
Very good. And you right there, Keyshawn, are exhibiting a positive role model. So that right there is something that you have just shared with folks that may be watching this video, of alternatives to coping and managing their stress. Let's go ahead to our next slide, talking about access to treatment and support. It's important that young folks have access, that they have the ability to talk to someone, particularly someone who is culturally competent. Christian, as our licensed clinician, can you talk to us briefly about access to support and treatment and what that may mean to young folks?
Treatment looks different for everybody. I guess the old school way was like go to therapy, have or see a counselor. But now what we're doing, especially in the college setting, is we're using peer advocates more frequently. People who are their peers, who are just trained in mental health first aid. They're trained in knowing the signs so they can refer, because we see now that most students or most youth, they want to go to a person they can relate to before they go see like a professional. So sometimes they may want to go talk to a friend or a peer advocate that may have that info, and then they can say, you know what? Yeah, I think I feel comfortable going to see a counselor now. So that's the first way of treatment, is through, as you all are hearing, through your peers, and knowing what resource to go to if you do know that you see your friend going through something, you see the signs. So That's the first thing. And then the second part is knowing that that treatment can look different, so many different ways. It's a holistic approach. It's not just one thing. It's how you're eating, what you're drinking. Are you getting sunlight? Are you sleeping? Are you resting? Are you getting 8 hours of sleep? You know, in college, you don't sleep in college, right? So how much sleep are you getting at night? It's picture overall health and well-being, where you're living at. You know, you keep your room dark at night so your eyes can rest and you can go into that REM sleep, rapid eye movement. So it's a holistic approach. It's not just one thing. It's looking at the whole picture. And that's the first step to really seeing how, what does treatment look like for an individual.
Wow. No, that's very good. And, you know, with that, I hate to be the guy to cut it off, but we are at time. But I want to thank each and every one of you for your participation, and also want to thank Mental Health California as well as Blue Shield of California's Blue Sky Initiative for being able to sponsor this and have conversations like this. So make sure you guys check out the website. Also check out brotherbewell.com for more information on all of the things to keep us well. In the meantime, brothers, be well.